tonight. My name is Daniel Seraldo. I'm the Executive Director of Miami Design Preservation Week, and we're very excited. We're trying something new this time, which is taking our educational programs on the road, and we have a great theme that Jeff Donnelly and Nancy Liebman came up with, which is to celebrate the great streets of the Art Deco District. This year, 2019, we're celebrating the 40th year since the Art Deco District was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So we thought, why not, rather than in our usual spot, take a little tour around to all these amazing streets. You know, I don't really know too many cities that have such unique streets as we do, so it's something that I think really brings a lot of visitors here, but it's also great to get the residents back onto these streets too. So I wanted to just say a quick thank you to the Donna Agency and Dana Agency, and to the Española Way Big, to Tapas and Tintos. Let's give them a round of applause. And I also wanted to say thank you to our new programs coordinator, Charlotte Salam, who has been working very hard and getting us a little more high tech, which is really exciting. And Caroline DeFries. Sorry, I'm getting all the names wrong. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that there is a locals card for Española Way. If you're a local, check out the brochure here. And if anybody doesn't have a brochure, raise your hand and we'll get you one. But if you go on your phone, you can get, it's called a mobile wallet, and you get 20% off on Española Way. So it's a great deal for locals. I happen to love tapas. Oh, you can't hear me? Okay. I love tapas and tintos, and I also love, there's a donut shop that's really good too, and a lot of other great places. So maybe someone can turn the volume a little higher because there's somebody you can hear in the back. And we're going to get started, and I'd like to introduce now, let's give a round of applause for our moderator. Oh, sorry, before I do that, last thing is that for each lecture we also have a companion walking tour. So Sandy Skidmore is here in the front. Sandy, raise your hand. She's going to be doing a walking tour on Española Way this Saturday morning. And so definitely check out our website, because you'll see we'll have the lecture, and then we'll have the walking tour. And also Jack Johnson, the chair of our board of directors, just arrived. So let's give him a round of applause. Do we have any tour guides in the audience? Please raise your hand. Thank you to all the tour guides that helped to keep us on the map and getting amazing press recently in the New York Times, etc. So let's all give a round of applause to Susan Askew, our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay. Can you hear us? You can hear me in the back, right? Okay, thank you, Daniel. I'm Susan Askew, and I am the founder and editor of RE Miami Beach. We are a blog and weekly newsletter focused only on Miami Beach news and information. I want to welcome you tonight to the first in this program series, and also to this charming street. For those of you who are not familiar, Española Way was conceived by N.D.T. Roney in 1925 as a historic Spanish village. He wanted you to feel as if you were transported into a romantic Mediterranean plaza when you came here. Today, the street boasts 17 dining establishments, including Tapas y Tintos. Thank you again for hosting us this evening. Art galleries, hotels, retail, and nightly entertainment. The format for tonight will be that I will introduce each panelist before they speak. They'll have about 5 minutes of welcoming introductions, talking a little bit about their experience on Española Way. I'll ask them one question, and then we'll come to the audience for your questions. I'd like to introduce first Scott Robbins to my right. Scott is the founder of Scott Robbins Companies. It's a real estate development firm specializing in development, construction, leasing, and commercial property management. He is a Miami native who has not only been involved in the development of many of the landmark projects here in Miami Beach, he's also an activist and preservationist. He was a driving force behind Sunset Harbor, many of you may be aware of that, and also the recent revitalization of Española Way. And his El Paseo hotel has also recently undergone restoration and renovation. Española Way has been a labor of love for Scott for the last 30 years. He has seen it at its best and at its worst, and as a result, we have asked him to kick us off this evening and kind of set the tone.
Thank you, everybody. I get to be the first one to talk about Española Way. I've been here for 30 years, and it's been truly an experience for me. And I know that you all are historians, so I just wanted to make sure that I had my facts right for everybody, because the facts of the street are very interesting. The street was originally built by Francis Whitman in 1922. And I'm not sure all of you know who Francis Whitman is, but Francis Whitman is actually the guy that developed Bal Harbor shops. So, way back when Francis was here, I guess he was so successful with Española Way that he is, and actually his family still owns the Bal Harbor shop. So that's a nice piece of history for all of you. When he built it, it was called the Spanish Village, and we still today call it the Spanish Village. Now, I don't know, I'm not sure what pictures you're seeing, but when Francis was developing Española Way, he met this guy, he knew this guy named, it was NBT Roney. So NBT Roney was a prolific builder in Miami Beach, and Francis, I guess, decided to team up with him to build what was called the Spanish Village, and I'm quoting, it's a quote that I could never come up with, so I have to read it, but they built Española Way for artists and lovers of artistic who might congregate amid congenial surroundings. So that was really the concept behind the creation of Española Way by these two guys. And I don't know if any of you don't know a little more history about Roney, but Roney went on to build the Roney Plaza. I'm not sure if any of you know what the Roney Plaza is. The beautiful hotel, it's become the One Hotel. Though not the W, but the One Hotel. And basically they wanted Española Way to be here for all of the people that went to their hotel. Española Way came around because the New Yorkers who were coming down here, they wanted a place where they could be creative, where they had all these like ideas of what it could be. They actually wanted it to be very similar to an artist area in New York called Greenwich Village. So Greenwich was sort of the impetus of what they wanted to have happen here. And they wanted to also make it similar to the artists' colony in Paris. I haven't been to that artist colony, maybe some of you have, I'm not even sure it's still there. But Roney was the builder, and he had a favorite architect. Not as good as Todd Tragash, because Todd is a really, really good architect. But it was a guy named Robert A. Taylor. Robert A. Taylor was the architect of Española Way, and what these two gentlemen decided to do was they wanted to create a Spanish village. They wanted to create architecture in the Spanish Revival form, because they thought that Spanish Revival was going to be the architecture of South Florida. And in fact, in many areas, it might be the architecture of South Florida, except for here. And I really miss my good friend Nancy Lehman. I don't know, I hear she's not feeling well, and I was hoping to see her here, but it became Art Deco. So most of Miami Beach, and I'm sure all of you probably know this as well or better than I do, but Miami Beach is mostly Art Deco, and Art Deco sort of took over in the 30s, and Art Deco is really the prevalent architecture of Miami Beach, not necessarily Coral Gables or anything like that, but so Whitman and Roney get together and they build Española Way, and they spent back then $1.5 million to build the street. Now, $1.5 million back then was a lot of money, and later on in my story, you'll kind of laugh at what happens afterwards. But Española Way really didn't kind of really reach its potential back then. They had all these grandiose plans for it, but it really became a place where, during Prohibition, Al Capone actually ran a speakeasy, and it was known sort of locally as a place to drink, and I think maybe a little bit of a red light district. So that's sort of what became of it back then, and it certainly didn't fulfill all of their dreams back then. But then in World War II, just as a lot of the buildings in Miami Beach became housing for a lot of the troops, and Española Way was also housing for the troops, and that went on for a period of time. And then right after World War II, during a very joyous period, a dance called the rumba was created, and Española Way became the rumba capital of the world, and the guy that actually made Española Way the rumba capital of the world was a little-known guy named Desi Arnaz. So Desi Arnaz actually danced the rumba on the street. Anyway, I want to fast forward a little bit to the present day and my involvement. If I'm talking too long, let me know. Española Way was. Am I getting close? All right. So okay, I'm going to go really quick now. So Española Way was on the National Register. It was put on the National Register in 1979. In 1986, the city of Miami Beach, thanks to people like Barbara Bear-Capitman, Nancy Lehman, put it on, made Miami Beach actually designated as one of the most important historical streets. My brother and I bought this hotel and bought the street, actually the north side of the street. That's my side. In 1989, my brother and I back then paid $1 million for the north side of the street. The street was in terrible disrepair, and in this case, the bad hombres back then were dealing drugs and working in prostitution. The street was really a mess. Craig and I decided to clear out the entire top floors of all of those people. We created the Española Way Art Center. So the Española Way Art Center was sort of replaced all this thing. Now this was a space that we created for artists, so artists could come, do their work. The public was welcome to walk through the buildings. They could sell their art. We had actually some great artists come through the Española Way Art Center, like, I'm not sure any of you would remember him, but his name was Craig Coleman. He's kind of the most famous artist. So, and then, let's see. So, and then I get to my neighbors. So I had some great neighbors over the years. Ed Seltzer and Linda Polanski, they came to the street, and they actually owned the north side. It's so important to have real estate and developers that actually care and love the streets that they own, and these people did as well. And they resurrected the Clay Hotel. The Clay Hotel went back for, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 years. They created a youth hostel there. They began to, with the artists calling it the youth hostel, the street began to really turn over. And I'm going to speed up a little bit and get to the end. So today, Española Way has over 20 restaurants and retail stores. It was named the best street in South Florida by the Miami Herald. It was a regional competition. Somehow, I think my son actually put on a whole presentation, actually won that award. But I just want to say that presently over 240 hotel rooms are being constructed there. And I have to say, I honestly believe that today, and I can't forget the city. So the city, 2.5 years ago, spent $2.5 million to redo the street. They made it all pedestrian. They took away the streets. The sidewalks are level. This new pavement that you see, it's all new over the last 2.5 years. And I can't thank the city enough for trusting us the way they have, and they financed us in their creation of the streets. So without the city, none of this happens. And I just want to say that I think that today, Española Way probably represents what Whitman and Roney had in mind over 100 years ago when they first created the street. So I have to say that I can't be more proud of, and I forgot to mention our new neighbors that we're equally proud of, and we're so excited to have them as the guys that we're dealing with, David Berg and Stephen Casson. Just wonderful people and so deserving of the opportunity to be part of such a special street. And I'm so excited to see what these guys do over there. I know it's going to be special, and I hope that the street is here for now and into the distant future for all of you to enjoy. And by the way, we want to encourage locals here. If you're having trouble getting locals cards, it's a 20% discount on every restaurant, most of the restaurants we have on the street. So if you need help, call us. We'll figure out how to get you either a piece of paper, or if you guys don't have smartphones or whatever, to get your discount coupon or whatever it is. Anyway, with that, I guess I'll turn it back to Susan.
Thank you, Scott. We're now going to go back further into the colorful history of Española Way with Mike Blandino. Mike grew up on Española Way, which I think is a pretty interesting thing to have done. His grandmother was Haiti Scull. Haiti and her twin sister, Sahara, identical twin sisters, were born in Havana, Cuba. And they became painters, sculptors, and assemblage artists known for their humorous three-dimensional paintings and sculptures of old Havana and trendy South Beach. One writer described their work as combining 1950s tropical burlesque with 1990s South Beach funkiness. They left Cuba for Miami in the late 60s, early 70s at different times, and they settled here, lived on Española Way, were a very colorful presence here, and Mike says that often one of them would walk him to school just a few blocks away. So we're looking forward to your stories.
Good evening, everybody. ¿Qué pasa, Miami Beach? Thank you for giving me this opportunity for me to be here at Española Way, my childhood street. I've seen a lot of changes. I mean, it's amazing what they've done here throughout the years. My grandmothers came to Miami Beach in 1969, and they fell in love with Miami Beach. At first they came to Miami, which is Little Havana. They stayed there for like about a month, and they were okay with it, but they came down to the beach and they fell in love with Miami Beach. And they made a lot of successful arts here in Miami Beach and Miami and Coral Gables. A lot of clients commissioned their work throughout the years in the 70s and 80s, and I mean, everybody fell in love with their work because their work is a combination of three-dimensional work sculpture and painting. Not paper mache. A lot of people thought it was paper mache, but it's a special sculpting. By 1970, my dad, Michael, he was about maybe 18 or 19 years old at the time. He joined to work together with my grandmother. Because my great aunt they didn't come together in 69 days. One of them stayed in Cuba because of the communism that was going on in Cuba. And yeah, in 1970, my dad started working with my dad, and he started, you know, getting to know the art and everything, and he learned a lot from my grandmother, and my grandmother was like a teacher to him with the arts. And then by 1973, this is before I was born. I was born in 78. So by 73, my great aunt Sahara finally arrived to Miami in 73, and they joined together and they started doing the combination of three-dimensional artwork and the teamwork, you know, the family teamwork with my grandmother, my great aunt, and my dad. And then by 1974, there was a grand opening of a new structure in Lincoln Road with these Spanish roofs that they had around the woolworths and everything. I don't know, a lot of people remember that, but I do remember it very well as a little boy. And they had a nice event there with the mayor of Miami Beach. His name was Chuck Hall in 1974, and he invited my grandmothers and my dad to do a show for the grand opening of the new Lincoln Road in 1974. And there was artwork all over the place of my grandmothers and my great aunt and my dad, and people fell in love with it, and people just looked at it. They fell in love with it. It was, people tried to touch it, and you know, people aren't supposed to touch any art, but it was so realistic, so cool. You know, it was awesome. You know, it's one of a kind artwork. And then by 1975, my dad was married at the Miami Beach Community Church. He was only 22 years old at the time. And my parents were still together after 45 years. And then in 78 I was born. And then throughout the years I started watching them doing the artwork. I mean, I grew up with art all my life. And also, you know, walking down on Española Way is you know, it's such a wonderful street, because I remember when the cars used to come by here and they would park around here. There was plenty of park at the time, you know. There wasn't too much traffic like it is today, you know. But it's a very interesting street. I mean, I fell in love with it. I mean, I lived down the street on Española Way in Pennsylvania, on the corner of Pennsylvania. And you know, that was a wonderful place that I lived in. You know, it was an apartment building, and then by 81, when I was 3 years old, they bought the whole property. My grandmothers and my dad and my, you know, because of all the income that they made throughout the years with their work. I mean, a lot of people bought their work, and even celebrities, people from all around the world. And you know, and we fell in love with that corner house right there on Española Way in Pennsylvania. We lived there from 69 to 89. By 1989, when I was 11 years old, we had to sell the property because there was some economical problems that was going on with the finances with the property by that time. And then Mr. Tony Goldman, our wonderful friend, God bless his soul, that he already passed away a few years ago. He also fell in love with my grandmother's work, and he became a huge collector of my family's artwork. And the Park Central Hotel, you know, the Tiffany Hotel, all these great hotels, and Ocean Drive. Thanks to Barbara Kaplan that saved all these wonderful buildings. You know, if it wasn't for her, you know, these buildings wouldn't have been here today. And so Mr. Tony Goldman was a wonderful friend of the family, and he helped us out a lot, and he introduced us to a lot of people. and we made a lot of connections, a lot of networking throughout the years in the 90s when we moved from Pennsylvania to Collins and 9th Street. We lived there for 10 years from 1999 to, from 1989 to 2000. And then after the year of 2000, we had to move out to another location. And Mr. Tony Goldman gave us a space at the Park Central Hotel to have a little meetings with the clients and having a little studio working inside the hotel to to have clients coming visit the hotel, the lobby, and talk about the Art Deco industry and the buildings and everything, and talk about their artwork, and that's how they made their commission. So and then by after 2001 and 2003 until like 2007, they worked really hard until the very, very last day, until they passed away in 2007. My grandmother Haiti, she passed away of, she was asleep while she passed away. And then my great aunt, she passed away 7 months after. They didn't pass away the same day. They passed away 7 months after in May of 2008. And they didn't stop working. They worked until the very last day, and all of a sudden right now, my dad, he still does the artwork every part-time, because right now he's taking care of my mom. My mom suffers from diabetes, so she's doing okay. But yeah, I mean, the artwork of my grandmother's is very, very recognizable in Miami Beach, in Miami, all over Miami-Dade County, and not only in Miami, all over the world. And their work is one of a kind, extraordinary. And if it wasn't for Barbara Kaplan and for Tony Goldman, Miami Beach wouldn't have been what it is today. So I really appreciate and thank you very much for having me here at Tapas and Tintos. And God bless everybody. Thank you.
Okay, next is Todd Tragash. Todd co-founded STA Architectural Group in 1985, and his formal training is in architectural preservation, but he got some real hands-on practice when he first graduated and came back to his hometown of Miami Beach, which had just recently been historically designated. His early projects included the Clevelander Hotel and the Raleigh Hotel. And one of the things I thought was interesting was one of his public projects is known as the 10th Street Auditorium, I guess, right? But I think of it as the MDPL building and Welcome Center. But like Scott, Todd has seen this street in its worst state, downtrodden and seedy, but participated in the first restorations in 1984 and 1986. And when he founded his architectural company, his firm, their first office was on Española Way and was here for about 10 years. Todd.
Thank you. Yeah, this brings back very fond memories. And I was a recent graduate from the University of Florida. I came back and I got a job with Lester Pancoast. I was working in Coconut Grove, but living in Miami Beach. I first rented a place, the Heathcote on Ocean Drive, and then finally bought a unit on Meridian and 12th Street. And so when there was a program, and Lynn Bernstein's in the audience, she was running that program through the county, which was a facade rehabilitation program. And during that time, the early 80s, that was probably the lowest economic cycle of Miami Beach. And there were a lot of plans for doing things at our brand door, but the store owners really didn't have any ability to really put money in. And there was, I think it was like a $3,500 grant that the store owner would get, and it was limited to paint, signage, and awning. And it was only allowed for stores that fronted Washington Avenue. Unfortunately, Española Way does have a front on Washington Avenue. So in 1984, we did this, we were hired, and when I say 3,500, that was the total improvements. I think our fee was $50 or something like that. But and fortunately, because there were so many buildings in Española Way, I think we got $50 for each section of building. But it was limited to paint, signage, and awning. And this was a remarkable transformation of West Side. It was a tremendous success. Then in 1986, we did the North Side. There was a gentleman named Jerry Sanchez who came to Miami, and he was a preservation contractor that had a paint company. And so he not only bought the building on the north side, but he wanted to use it as a showcase of what he could do. And he was emphatic that not only would we work on the project, but we would have to sign a lease with him and have our office inside the building. And back then, the rates, I think we were paying $5 a square foot, and we were paying the most of anyone on the whole block. And we had a 10-year plus lease, and we were on top of the second floor of the mid-building. Underneath us was Beach Poultry, which was a phenomenal, iconic space, and it stayed there until it burned. And then we were there during the fire. One of the features we had in our entryway was a parrot, and the parrot would stay there all night, and when the fire broke out, I knew Española Way well enough I could sneak around and go rescue the parrot. But it's, I love Miami Beach. I've been living on Miami Beach. I grew up in Miami, but moved to Miami Beach in the early 80s, 82, and had our office here from 86 to 96, and then we've moved to Lincoln Road, but been practicing all types of projects. Fortunately, doing some projects for the city. We did the 10th Street Auditorium, which is the Miami Design Preservation League headquarters and the Beach Patrol headquarters. We did the fire station headquarters at 8 Boulevard and Pine Tree Drive. We worked on the Monument Island with the obelisk off of Fisher Island, doing the restoration of that. The Hispanic Community Center, relocating that from Collins Avenue to Normandy Drive, and also more recently the Jewish Community Center. And those are our public projects, but we've done a lot of historic hotels, restaurants, clubs. One of the early clubs was down the street on Española Way called the Warsaw Ballroom. We did OVO at the Warsaw Ballroom. And it was just a phenomenal time to be in such a phenomenal place, Miami Beach, during the 80s and 90s. And to this day, I really enjoy working here on Miami Beach and working on the various projects.
You held out on me. You left the parrot and the fire story out of our conversation getting ready for this panel. Great story. David Berg is our final panelist. He's a partner with Infinity Real Estate, where he oversees the firm's investment ventures and implementation of strategy in New York City, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and Miami. He's been instrumental in driving the company's acquisitions, capital transactions, and in development execution with over $450 million in transactions. What I found very interesting was that over half of the properties in Infinity's portfolio have been historically restored. As David said to me, properties that are less mall-like and have more character. Certainly when they got involved in Española Way, that property met that criteria. In 2015, the owner of the Clay Hotel asked Infinity Real Estate to partner with them and to renovate and restore the Clay Hotel. That work is now ongoing, and in the meantime, David is a very active member of the development community here in Miami Beach. He's vice president of the Española Way Association, a member of the board of directors of the Ocean Drive Association, and an advisory member of the Washington Avenue Business Improvement District. So David has maybe more recent history, and to talk a little bit about where we are now and where we're headed.
Thank you for having us. Just a quick background, because we're from New York and the new fresh blood of the street. Infinity Real Estate is an owner, operator, and developer based out of Manhattan. But over 50% of our projects are historic redevelopment, revitalization projects. So in every major city that we focus on, we typically go to historic streets such as Ocean Drive, Española Way, Newbury Street in Boston, Chestnut Street, Walnut Street, and Broad Street in Philadelphia. And this is really our bread and butter, which is preserving historic projects. In 2015, we got involved in this project by chance. We entered Miami Beach as an investment firm in 2014 with projects on Ocean Drive, and we were introduced to the owner of the Clay Hotel, who owned this property for over 26 years and ran it as a hostel and varying different uses over that ownership period. The project, whenever we get involved in any historic project, our main focus is to draw on the history. We look back with a historian to look back at the historic resources and determine what was the initial impetus for the project, from the initial architect to the initial builder. So this is a similar quote that was already said, but this was the inspiration for our redevelopment, which is that this was from Miami News in 1925. The Spanish village of Miami Beach is destined to become a famous place among the artists and intellectuals of the nation. So I think the initial vision for this street was the Spanish village, was an artist type of colony, and the Clay Hotel was actually initially called the Española as the first name of the hotel. What we are focused on doing with our project is bringing back the artist nature, the artist colony history of this project throughout the time, and I think everyone's touched on it a little bit. The street's gone through the ups and downs of different attractions. It was a destination in the Jazz Age, it was a gambling ring in the Capone days, an artist colony initially, a red light district at some point, and today it's really one of Miami Beach's premier tourist destinations and a street that we think has more charm than anywhere else in Miami Beach and should be a destination for both locals and tourists alike. So our focus with our renovation and redevelopment is to draw on the history of each of these components, pay homage to this bygone era, and a little bit of a sneak preview of what we're doing. We'll be renaming the project to the Joya Hotel, which means gem in Spanish. And we're going to really try to reintroduce this village type of approach. Most people don't know is behind the walls of both Scott's property and our property, there's these beautiful paseos, these Spanish decorated paseos that are underutilized and not really trafficked right now. Our intent is to bring more of a Mediterranean or European village feel to these paseos and to this street, and draw on the history of this artist colony and this village feel to things. The other property that we own is across the street on Drexel, which was actually called, and still is called, Village Matanzas, which means massacre in Spanish. So this is where, we're actually going to, oddly enough, we're going to keep that name. And that building will be called Casa Matanza, and draw on the history of the Capone gambling days. So that's our intent. We focus, Scott and I work together a lot and focus a lot on the Española Way Association, which is almost like self-governing association with the city support and all of the tenant support to a set of rules, regulations, guidelines, throw events similar to this. We've thrown the Southern Wine and Food event. We've had different corporate buyouts. We had the mayor's event one year. We do the Air and Sea Show event every single Memorial Day weekend. So that's what we're looking to focus on, programming and really creating a isolated village in this area and bring people outside of the hustle and bustle of South Beach and into our village, which we think has a different feel. It's much more charming than anywhere else you can find on South Beach, and really bring attention to the Mediterranean revival architecture, which you can't find anywhere else. So I think that's something, a branding and marketing message that people are missing, which is that it's not differentiated as a different architectural experience than you can find anywhere else on the beach. So that's our intent and a little bit about us. Thank you.